This is our final session of the Sweatworking Summit, which is focused on flexing your mental muscle. We are going to be digging into nature for your mental health with our partners from the Miraval Resorts and specifically from Miraval Berkshires. Let us know in the chat where you are and your plant expertise. So if you're a plant parent, you love your plants, you have one on your desk, we want to know. And maybe a restorative experience. There we go. There's the word. Restorative experience you've had in nature. Mark Giroux shared a prompt that you may have seen in Slack, but I'm going to share it too in the chat so that we all can enjoy this. Maybe you answer, maybe you just think about it for later. But we're going to get started in just a second. Tell us your plant expertise. Oh, you kill everything. Oh no. Oh, let me make sure I post to everyone. Okay, here we go. There we go. All right. So let's get it started. With us today, we have an expert. To call him anything less would be just really underselling Mark. Some of the team have had the pleasure of meeting Mark, of experiencing some of the ways he interacts with the world, with energy, with mindfulness at Miraval in the Berkshires. I actually took his floating meditation. Christiana on our team was fortunate enough to do your trauma release. I think trauma release yoga. Is that right, Mark?
It's a trauma releasing exercises, tension and trauma releasing exercises, or TRE. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Miraval, as we know, they're luxury resorts. They have 3 of them in the Berkshires, in Austin, where I am today. Not at Miraval, that would be very lucky. And in Arizona. And one of you is going to be so fortunate as to win a 3-night stay at a Miraval resort of your choosing. And you can bring a friend. It's a double occupancy experience. So I believe we're pasting in the chat. I'm going to make sure it's in there too. I'm sure Mia did it because she's been on it. But make sure you add your name for extra entries into this type form. Without any further ado, let's meet Mark though. So Mark Giroux has 20 plus experience. Let me start over, Mark. Boy, Gina. Mark Giroux, I'm getting nervous. I think you're so expert and so incredible that I'm getting nervous. Maybe it's because I had that great meditation experience with you. Okay, Mark's diverse background and 20 plus years of experience in the military, recovery, rehabilitation, and outdoor guiding inform his approach. He's created a full range of therapeutic tools to work with people who suffer from sadness, pain, and loss of spiritual connection, sometimes due to underlying trauma. Against the backdrop of the great outdoors, Mark uses his daily dose method, along with mind-body techniques, to address the root causes and driving forces of symptoms. Mark's path to recovery helps people reprogram their neural pathways, build mindful habits, and release blocks to grow and find healing. Mark, let's talk about plants, forest bathing, and how we can bring it into our home. What did I miss about you?
That seemed like a lot. I was like, do I do all that? But yes, I do. Thank you for the introduction and welcome everyone. It's a lot of snow here behind me in the Berkshires, but I'm in a nice warm sound pod today. And yes, we're going to talk about the ways we can use, like you heard a little bit of my background. So my daily dose approach is more of a, I don't know if you've heard the word Kaizen in business realms, but it means a small good change. And when we're talking about our nervous systems and burnout and overwhelm and all the overstimulation that we've been going through, it behooves us to kind of go in these small, tiny doses so that we don't feel overwhelmed. So for instance, I do a 30-second cold shower. I do the Wim Hof method, cold immersion. So I might do a little breath work. I might hold a couple of yoga poses for a few minutes or do a 2-minute Qigong. But then I go into the shower and do some resilience building with a 30-second cold shower or a minute or so, as well as going into the forest, which we're going to talk about today. Going into the forest, it doesn't have to be a long time and it doesn't even have to be a forest. as I'm going to talk to you about. It could be a park. It could be just a plant that's in your home that you end up kind of meditating and creating union with just by staring at the green of the plant. There are benefits, and we'll talk about that. So I lived in Japan for 4 years in the military, and I learned some things like Kaizen. I learned about the culture, and I also learned a little something, and then was trained here in the States, something called shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing. And so when people think forest bathing, they think, well, I don't want to go in the water. And it's not necessarily about getting in the water at all. The bathing that is referred to here is Shin-Renyoku means absorbing through your senses the forest atmosphere. What is the forest atmosphere? It could be moss and stone, trees, flora and fauna, birds, the sounds of birds, the feeling of the breeze against your skin. So it's about going through your senses to get directly to your nervous system, to calm and regulate. And for me, and you heard a little in the introduction, I battled with trauma, not only in my childhood, but in the military and as an adult, and also with struggling with addiction in order to kind of chase away anxiety and depression. And as I became sober, I had to really learn what is recovery. And for recovery from addiction, it's a lot about trauma and how to work with these triggering feelings like anxiety. It can be overwhelming. And if you don't understand depression, you know, when you tell someone with depression to get up and go to the gym, it's just not possible when you're riddled with it and debilitated. So taking these tiny doses of going into the forest or other tools that I use really helped me to manage the feelings, and not only to push them away or eradicate them, just the opposite. Let me lean into them. Let me immerse myself with the feelings that I'm experiencing and integrate things from the subconscious, my past, to the present conscious living. And that's what we sometimes don't understand, is that when I express my emotions, when I feel my feelings, whether they're difficult or not, I integrate them into the present moment instead of compartmentalizing them. So Shin Renyoku, and stop me anytime. You can write it to the chat if you have questions, you want clarification, I'm here for you. So Shin Renyoku came from Japan in the 80s. People were experiencing high levels of burnout, which I think you all can probably relate to in some way. Burnout, overwhelm, overstimulation. There was even levels of like addiction and also suicide. So doctors were prescribing Shin-Renyoku, forest bathing. So you would go, if you were prescribed forest bathing, you would be assigned to a facilitator like myself in Japan. 67% of all Japan is forest. So there were 2 attempts to not only preserve and enlighten people about the value of being in the forest, but also to show you that there is a deep connection that can happen, and it can change and shift your own physiology, mental state, emotional state, just by being in nature. And these Shin-Renyoku sessions were 3 hours long, 3 to 4 hours long. And so here at Miraval, we might do just a couple of hours, you know, door to door, take the van, go out, be in the woods, hour and a half, 2 hours, and then come back. So that was the prescription. Now, how does it work? So I'll take you through a little, like the process of what we might do. So first, as we're right there at the edge of the forest, we orient to place. I might tell you something about the glaciers that were here 20,000 years ago, and that we might be looking straight up at a mile of ice. I'll tell you about the indigenous culture that lived here on this land in the Berkshires, like the Mohican Indians that were here 18,000, 14,000 years ago. As the glaciers were melting, there were inhabitants of the Mohican Indians here in this locale, but it might be different where you are. So we want to understand place, the forest, what happened here prior to us stepping foot in the Berkshires. There were a lot of clear-cut forests for farmland and pulp to make paper. There were cider mills. So just to know, like, what was this land about? Who lived here? And so we want to understand and honor what came prior to us stepping foot into the forest. And then once we can honor that, we might have a little more openness and gratitude as we step into what we call the threshold of the forest. We go into what we refer to as forest time or liminal time. So when you think about forest time, let me put it in perspective for you. You step on a tack, an electrical impulse in a millisecond goes to your brain and says, you've stepped on a tack and your foot lifts. So these same electrical impulses, let's say in a tree, an impulse moves through a tree about 1 foot per hour. So that's slow. That impulse moving through the tree slowly, like the maple sugars in spring that are now moving here in the Berkshires. They move slowly through the tree from the roots to the buds that are now going to start unfurling. And so that's very slow, and we want to slow ourselves down. So as we understand forest time and understand what's called liminal time is the space between two ordinary moments. An ordinary moment would be taking the van from Miraval to the woods, being on your phone, talking to each other, traffic, all of that. And then you go into the forest and you lose track of time because the concept disappears as we go into this slower and slower time where we walk slowly and we learn something called fox walking, that's walking from the toes to the heel, toes to the heel. And this is to create less disturbance. Why do we want less disturbance? Well, we want to drop into what we call the baseline rhythm of nature, which is slower. And if we're just busting, you can imagine like Americans running into the woods from New York City, blah, blah, blah. We're loud, we're noisy, we're pounding the ground as we walk fast, and we're talking and chit-chatting, right? This is normal. This is what happened to me when I would walk into the woods for the first 15 minutes. I was anxious. So I'd catch myself talking and chit-chatting and moving fast. And so the invitation is which we use lots of invitations in forest bathing. The first invitation is to come into forest walking, maybe, and to walk slowly and mindfully, probably half the pace that you might walk normally. And I'm going to ask you to come to your senses. So I would ask you to go through the Rolodex of your senses, hearing the birds, feeling the wind against your skin or the cold air, or the warm air or the light. Walking on the ground, and if it was summer or fall or something like that, I might ask you to take off your shoes and walk with your bare feet on the floor of the forest. And so you walk slowly and you sense, you come to your senses and you begin to drop into this baseline rhythm of nature. Whereas we go too fast, and if we're too loud, guess what happens? The birds quiet down, they become alerted. You might even hear alarm calls is what we call it, of the chipmunk and the birds. You know, they're making alarm calls to tell everyone else, because the birds are like sentinels. They're watching everything down below, and they can tell you when there's a predator like an owl or a human. And so everyone gets quiet, and they want to determine whether we are a threat. But if we're walking slowly and mindfully with our senses, then maybe we'll be part of the baseline rhythm, and you'll be a part of the morning song of the birds. Instead of alarm calls, you hear the chorus of the birds. You might see a deer walking, or a porcupine climbing a hemlock tree, or the mushrooms that are there. If we walk too fast and too quickly in our normal pace, we start to miss a lot. It's too overwhelming. All the data is just coming in, we're missing it. And so we slow down. This baseline rhythm, or this slowing down, we talk about our level of disturbance. So by talking loud, by pounding the ground with our feet, we create a bubble of disturbance, which alarms everyone that we're here. Because think about it, humans are kind of loud and noisy, and we move around fast. So that's not the way the forest works, right? So if we can bring in our level of disturbance, our level of awareness grows. As our level of awareness grows outward, our level of disturbance shrinks. And now we have a very small bubble of disturbance around us. So think of how that works. Your level of awareness grows. You're tuning into your senses. Your nervous system slows down into the parasympathetic, rest, recover. Great for people that are stressed out, traumatized, overwhelmed. And now we get to really tune in to the sounds and sights and feelings. We touch the moss. We take off our shoes in the summer and put our feet in the stream. We listen with our deer hearing. We do something called deer hearing, where we cup our ears and we listen behind us. Deer can turn their ears in 360 degrees, because if they're sipping from a stream, there could be a predator behind them, and they want to be able to listen in all directions. So we imitate that with our deer hearing. We cup our ears and we can hear behind us, and then we cup the back of our ears so we can hear forward, and then we do a little of both so we can hear all directions. So cool. So we do things like that. We practice fox walking, deer hearing, owl vision. These are all things we learn and practice. And then as we move forward and we begin to move into that that greater awareness and less disturbance, we do things like we understand that the eyes pick up the color green more than any other color. And green of the forest, this natural green, has a way of lowering our blood pressure, our heart rate, just by staring out and opening up our perspective. Because you guys, you may know quite well that when you're focusing on a screen, for many hours, like there's studies to show that even before pandemic, quarantining, people were looking at their screens, whether it's a computer or a TV or a phone, for the average of 11 hours out of each day. 11 hours of what we call focused attention fatigue. This is a real thing. Your energy starts dropping. You lose the ability to focus as much. Your ADD may kick in. So what's the antidote to that? So focused attention fatigue, focusing inward at a little screen for many, many hours in the day. The antidote to that is what we call fascination attention. That is to pick up your head from the screen, maybe stand up, go over to your plant, or look out the window at your yard or your tree, or look out over the forest or whatever it is, a park, and just soften your gaze and broaden your periphery, like owl vision. Soften your forehead and your temples, and just soften the gaze and stare out. Come into your breath, and we call it green gazing or fascination attention, because it doesn't require that you see a rainbow or that you're standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon. Just look out at a tree out your window. And this begins to lower cortisol levels, heart rate, blood pressure changes. There was a study in Pennsylvania. They took a surgery ward, the floor of a surgery ward. And there were people that were recovering from surgery, who needed painkillers, who had to stay put in their beds and recover. And there were half of the people that were looking out their window at a brick wall. And the other half of the people were looking out at a tree or a park. And so what they found over time, that the people, and I think you know the answer to this, the people that were looking out at the trees had faster recovery time and less pain medication needed to control and manage pain. They felt more comfortable, recovery time faster, almost a day or two, quicker recovery than those that were staring out at a brick wall. So there's something to this green gazing, this fascination attention, the softening of the forehead and the eyes, and broadening your periphery rather than focusing intently on a screen that's emitting, stressful colors. So I wanted to mention that. Now, part of the absorption in nature comes from, yes, your senses, absorbing all the sights and sounds and textures and feelings and temperature changes and all of that. But quite literally, you are breathing in the atmosphere of the forest. There's something to that. For instance, we have hemlock trees. They're ancient trees that have been here since the Mahican Indians were here, and they called them their ancient or ancestral trees. And conifer trees like white pines, hemlocks, all of the different conifers with the needles instead of the leaves, these and all plant life emit a compound, a gaseous substance that's oily. It's more of the essence of the plant or the tree. And that oily compound is emitted, released from the trees out into the atmosphere. And we breathe in this atmosphere. And this just happens to have positive effects on us. These are referred to as phytoncides. Phytoncides are the oily compounds, different kinds of compounds, depending on what plant life and trees you're talking about. But these different compounds have one common kind of effect. All we need, there was a question or a prompt, maybe it was sent out to you. Can anyone tell me, before I finish this tangent, can anyone tell me how many minutes per week you would need in nature to receive the benefits? How many minutes a week, type it into the chat, do you need to receive the benefits of nature connection? And I'm not sure if I can see, 50, 15, 10, a week. So you're thinking 10 minutes a week, 15 minutes a week. It's going to be a little more than that. A day. Someone said a day. 90 minutes. So that's pretty close. 120 minutes a week. How many minutes is that a day that you need to distribute throughout the week to go into your backyard or go out into the local park, or to be with like a bonsai tree or something, a plant in your house? And really, there's not a lot of difference between the plant, the park, and the forest. So we need 120 minutes a week. That is not asking a lot to receive the benefits of these phytoncides, these gaseous substance that the plants, the trees are all emitting. And so these phytoncides, as you breathe them in, reduce cortisol, again, stress reduction. But here's the added benefit: 120 minutes, you're breathing in this, and it also helps build in your body the NK cells, the natural killer cells that help to fight and battle with things like tumors in the body. So very beneficial. And there's just so many studies with this. So I'm just not talking, I'm not making this up. This has been highly studied. This is evidence-based work that have been done since the 80s in Japan And then even further around the world and in the United States, we're doing it here as well. One of the key and essential components to forest bathing is the slowing down, the invitations, but the real juice is what we call a sit spot meditation. So what I'll have you do, let's say, is I'll say, use your body radar, look for a tree or some area that mirrors some aspect of you. So you might find a tree that's mirroring some aspect of you, something you're going through in your life, some part of your personality or makeup that is like what you're going through, who you are. And so you'll approach that tree, let's say, and I'll have you sit there, lean up against the tree, take some time and space with the tree, maybe sit up against it, and then open up your owl vision, your periphery, soften your gaze, and notice what you notice. Use your senses. Maybe it's your sight first. Then you hear a pileated woodpecker or a chickadee. And then suddenly, through the hemlock trees or the pine, you hear the wind. You see the breath. You feel the cold against your skin. And you slow down your breathing, nasal breathing. And as you tune into your exhales, your heart rate slows down. And now as you begin to slow down, more data appears available to you. You start to see things that you never saw before, like the mushroom growing on a tree that had fallen a year or two ago. Or if you're lucky enough, you see an owl fly by or a deer. You begin to notice things that you never noticed before as you drop into the baseline rhythm of nature. And it's very common. I've had this happen to me many, many times, where I'll sit there in stillness, as hard as that may be sometimes, to slow down. And suddenly I'll notice this whole flock of birds comes around and lands on the trees around me, and they get closer and closer, and they're talking to each other, and they're observing me, observing them, and there's no fear. There's a mutual kind of relationship that's happening. The natives that lived here once would refer to as an umbilical cord or a thread. As you come out into your backyard again and again and again, you begin a relationship with the birds and the species of plant life that are there. And you start to create this umbilical cord of thread that gets thicker and thicker and thicker as you begin to see the same bird, the same plant life, talk to the same tree over and over again. And there's this understanding, this learning, this deeper connection to nature. And if you think about it, folks, this is where you came from. We're built on this planet from all of the elements: earth, air, fire, water, ether. And so when you enter nature, it's like coming home. And so what have we done? We're living in a box. We drive a box. We work in a cubicle maybe. And we live in these spaces that are confined and compressed. And it's almost like we've been caged, even though it feels safe to be in our living room with the fireplace going and watching Netflix. Feels nice. But what is it like to go out into nature and sit with the elements and commune with the very thing that we were created from? The stardust, the earthly nutrients, the sunlight, air. and understanding how nature works, to have a greater appreciation for ourselves by way of connecting to others. Even John Muir, you've heard of John Muir? There's a John Muir trail out in California that I hike in the Sierras. John Muir was a conservationist. He actually taught Teddy Roosevelt about forest bathing, in a sense of going out into nature and communing with it in order to preserve places. If it weren't for John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt, you wouldn't have Yosemite. You wouldn't have Yellowstone. That was created from their connection out in nature. And even John Muir said, one day I decided to, I'm not quoting exactly, but he said something like, one day I decided to go on a walk. And that's what forest bathing, it's a meander. It's a meandering, a sauntering. So I decided to take a walk, and I ended up walking until sundown. Come to find out, by going out, I'm really going in. So by connecting outward into nature, you're taking your awareness deeper into who you are, how you feel, and you're encouraging that deeper nature connection. We've lost it, right? We've lost that to some extent, and kids don't know where their food comes from or what nature is about. And so there's a great book that we put on the list. I think you have an Amazon list of these books. There's one book by Richard Louv that I didn't put on there, but it's called No Child Left Behind, I think it's called. And it's about that connection with nature for children, to go back out into the wild and teach them about how things work in nature, the seasons, the cycles, the rhythms, and really respect that, because that's the next generations of people who will help to preserve the land and pass the teachings on of what nature is about and how we can help each other by preserving, conserving, and creating sustainability. What can you do? So as we come into the end of the tea serving ceremony, or the end of the forest bathing, there's a tea serving ceremony. And what I did in the beginning, if you were with me, is that hemlock tree I was talking to you about, that's emitting the phytoncides. We'd ask permission to pick a little sprig of it. We'd do a hemlock rub to release the phytoncides, and we'd smell them and smell that hemlock, which is like pine. It's that beautiful smell of like a Christmas tree or something that brings you home. And then we'd take that hemlock and we'd put it in hot water that I brought with me, and we'd all put the sprigs of the hemlock in there. And by the end of the forest bathing session, we would have a tea. And so we're sitting in a circle, we're serving tea, and we literally imbibe, we absorb the essence of the forest by this hemlock tea. And so we drink it, and each one of us would have the talking stick or the stone or whatever it is, and we pass it around, and we share something like an aha moment that we had, or an aspect of it that we can appreciate or we learn. And then we share gratitude, a true gratitude for what we learned today in our nature connection. And that natural gratitude only comes from when you don't have to effortfully think about, what am I grateful for? I'm doing a practice of gratitude. You don't even have to practice it. You just drop into the forest, you spend time, and the gratitude naturally arises. You are so appreciative of what you've been given naturally. And so we do a little sharing circle. We have the gratitude. And then I remind people that whether you have a small, medium, or large approach to nature, meaning small, the plant, the bonsai tree on your desk that you merge with and you take care of and you keep it growing, or you have a garden out back or a backyard with a few trees. Perfect. Go out there, get to know the rhythms of nature there. Or if you're lucky enough to have a forest, drive to it, walk to it, commune with it, maybe on a weekly basis, and spend that 120 minutes a week out in nature. Sure, you can do it all in one shot, Probably better to do small doses. What's your daily dose of nature? What can you do to give back in order to give to yourself? It's a reciprocal, synchronistic relationship that we have. Think about the trees. The trees are exhaling all those compounds that we're breathing in. We're breathing out carbon, which is their energy that they breathe in. And they give us back what we need, oxygen and so much more in these oily compounds, these phytoncides. So we can be very thankful when we go out there that this has been given to us. Now, what are we going to do to give back? What are we going to do to leave no trace? Even the Iroquois Indians had this concept, this way of thinking that I want to leave with you. It's called the seventh generation. You may know it as a detergent, but it's something completely different. Seventh generation was this concept that the decisions we make, especially in regards to nature and other people and other tribes that we live amongst, cultures, we want to think about these decisions and the impact it has on the world. For instance, on our water, on our forests, with our children. And we want to think about 7 generations beyond ourselves. A generation is approximately 30 years. So do the math. 7 times 30, I think, is 210 years. That's huge. Who thinks 210 years into the future? What will our water quality be like? What will our nature quality be like? What will our connection to other tribes, people, and cultures be like? And I think you know what's going on around the world right now. And some of it is not setting ourselves up. Getting a little tearful. Not setting ourselves up 7 generations into the future of working with different tribes, religions, people, cultures. So let's think about what we can do in a positive realm. So our kids and their kids and their kids and their kids, 7 generations into the future, will be taken care of. Thank you so
Mark,
much.
that's so beautiful. And we thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and also for getting vulnerable there at the end. I know we all have those things that we're so deeply passionate about, and it was so beautiful to see you share yours. I'm going to ask 3 questions from the group. Let's start with Rochelle P. She had a question. She wants to know, can conifer essential oils elicit the same response in candles?
The answer is yes. One of the oils that you can purchase on Amazon or anywhere, or you can extract yourself, one of the essence of oils that they use in Japan is, now I can't think of it. Oh my gosh. Cypress, that's what it is. Cypress oil. It's a very common one. Now, what you can do is you can literally like put it on a tissue, or you can put it in a vaporizer in your home. That's pretty common. You get a water vaporizer, you put those drops of cypress oil or any other oil that you favor, that you like the smell of, and vaporize it in your bedroom, at nighttime. Wonderful for receiving those compounds. Yeah, good question.
Amazing. All right, another question from Rochelle. She wants to know, does walking to and from the bus count towards 120 minutes a week in nature?
I would say yes. I mean, there's going to be hopefully plant life. There'll be trees along the road. You'll even see it sometimes. You'll see the split of asphalt, and then there'll be like a flower growing. It was crazy. Like 2 summers ago, I was walking down the sidewalk in the town that I live in, and there's like auto parts store, gas stations, Dunkin' Donuts, and right there, from a crack in the sidewalk, an actual sunflower was growing. And I had to take a photo of it. I was like, nature wins. Nature wins. You know, it's beautiful. So walking down the street, going to the bus from the house, I guess the point would be, what are you noticing? Do you notice the breeze? How does the sun make you feel? So I do what's called trauma-informed forest therapy. So my background is in trauma recovery, addiction recovery. And so someone who's been through stressful situations, debilitating situations, trauma, I take them out into nature and we look at different things as ways of self-regulation. So when I hear the stream, does it make me feel expansive and light? Does it make me feel grounded and calm? Does looking at the sun make me feel energized or calm? What does it do? What does it do to my regulation of my nervous system? So even a child going to a bus stop, or someone going to public transportation, like the subway, what do you notice? There in New York City, there's trees everywhere. There are hawks and eagles and birds. And I mean, it's crazy what you can really notice when you look up, you look around, and really take in the essence of nature that still exists in urban environments.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to ask one last question and then we'll wrap it up. From Carolyn, is there an ideal time of the day to go out and do forest bathing?
You can go out anytime, obviously, and you will benefit. But I would say if I had a choice, I would go at that kind of threshold time at the beginning of the day when the sun is rising, or at the end of the day when the sun is setting. Like go out an hour before the sun sets or something, or 2 hours or whatever it may be. And that's a time when a lot of the animals begin to move again. They begin to move from their foraging places where there's food to their sleep locations, or vice versa, from their sleep location to finding food and doing the busyness of the day. And it's a beautiful time of day. I love that. The golden hour is what we call it, where the light is coming more horizontally instead of high noon, where it's just straight down and it doesn't create a lot of shadows. So at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, there'll be these wonderful long shadows and rays of light in this golden color, and it'll illuminate things for a few minutes that you might not see when you're just walking at high noon. So if I had a choice, I would go at those times of day.
Love that. Thank you so much, Mark. I'm going to post one more time. Oh, thank you, Mia. Mia beat me to it. I was going to post one more time the opportunity to enter for a chance to win, or to enter extra for a chance to win the Miraval giveaway. Huge thank you to you, Mark, and to Miraval and to Miraval Berkshires. Your knowledge was so incredible today, and I've learned so much. I hope you all have as well. Make sure to post into the chat your gratitude for Mark, not forced gratitude, obviously, it'll just bubble up naturally. But I also want to take the opportunity to thank some of our partners throughout the summit. This is our very last session, friends. So huge thank you to Nick's, excuse me, to Humble Nut Butter, which may or may not have changed your life if you have your box, to Mad Tasty, as well as to a couple of other partners that actually will help you take this session and internalize it in your life. So if you have gotten your box already, grab your well-being boost. This is actually a little seed ball that you can plant at home, inside or out, depending on what your weather is like at home. Maybe let's just prepare for it to frost a couple more times, no matter where you are. Plant this inside. Take this little well-being boost plant. It has sage, echinacea, lemon balm, chamomile in it. Plant it, let it grow, and then take care of those plants and see how that impacts your life. And then let's also make sure that you all keep a lookout for your additional package. If you signed up for a ranch rider. That's on its way. Don't worry. And if you haven't gotten your box yet, that's on its way as well. Friends, show us how you force bathe, by the way, after this, and tag maybe your nature experience, where you go after this session. Maybe plant your seed bomb and show us. Tag at Miraval Resorts, at Mod Sprout, and at A Sweat Life. Mark, if you want to pop your Instagram handle in the chat too, I think you'd love to see how people are internalizing this too. We plan this session to go very last. Oh, thank you. We planned this session to go very last because we wanted to give you an invitation, friends, to take everything we've done internally, all of our work, whether that was playful dance, whether that was talking about trauma, whether that was talking about breaking the stigma, and invite you to take it out into your real life. Go outside. So this has been such an incredible weekend of rest, recovery, and introspection. And we want to say thank you to all of you attendees who have made this so incredible, to all of our partners and presenters who've given us such incredible takeaways to take into our daily lives. We can't wait to hear from all of you as you're thinking and internalizing this. DM us at A Sweat Life or tag us in your post. We love that stuff. We'll be following up with a survey afterwards so you can share what you loved and your feedback. Also, we just added a channel on Slack, #gratitude. So if there's any speaker you'd love to thank, any brand you'd love to thank, or just general gratitude you want to share for each other, post it there. We'll be sharing all the recordings afterwards, so you'll get access to all of those in an email. Melissa, if you don't have access to email, you can chat us on Slack, chat us on Instagram. We have so many ways to find us. But friends, thank you, thank you, thank you. Mark, thank you so much. This was wonderful. Let's go live our best lives.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Great to meet you in this cyber format. And I put my handle down there for Instagram. It's an easy one to remember: stress less, all one word, stress less. Please stay in touch. If you have any other questions, please shoot me a message if you'd like through Instagram or even Miraval. And I hope to see you here. And let's go out, live our best lives. And let's do it this afternoon. Let's go out and sit in nature for a few minutes. Come to a sit spot. I challenge you, give you some homework. Do a little sit spot. It shouldn't be a forced thing, just like the gratitude. It will come to you. Just spend a few minutes and come to your senses. Use your senses, and that is the key to making that deeper connection. And good luck, everyone. I hope to see you here at Miraval Berkshires. Be well.
Bye, Mark. Bye, friends. Let's go meet a tree.